of my professional development, I think,
Yeah.
after I became a young adult. But anyhow, so let's start. Okay, so um, you were telling me a little bit about your the time of the pandemic and when you were starting your own, well, the school that you were working in.
Yeah, my
Yeah.
career.
Okay. So keep going. Sorry, I interrupted
Oh
you.
no, yeah, yeah, and I don't know. Did you have the opportunity to teach in regular language school, or did you already start out um, with your own clients?
No, I taught in a few different schools
Hmm.
before branching out with my own clients, for sure. I
Great,
think that was
yeah,
actually super important to the process of
yeah. It
doing
was.
what I'm doing now.
It was very important during those time when it was happening. I felt really bad emotionally
Okay.
because not all places were like healthy.
Okay. How so?
But well, demands that we couldn't like complete because not because of our own um work ethic, but because like we cannot do that.
How so? Like, can you
As
give
I
an
told you,
example?
for like the students, I had so many students that were really struggling.
Okay.
Yeah, most of the students, most of my students were adults, so they
Okay.
worked, had family, and the classes were like 2 hours long.
Okay.
Yeah,
Two
once a week,
hours.
2 hours long, once a week. Yeah,
Okay. Interesting.
yeah, and um, some students they would go to class straight after work, and they were like zombies. Some of them were like zombies. But I am lucky because I'm like such an extrovert person, and I speak like loudly, and I am very funny. I'm not saying that my students say that, okay?
Okay.
I'm not
No,
being.
for
So
sure.
I'm very funny, and but I can like grab their attention and make it easy, make it fun. But it only goes so far. It only goes so far. Some students were like, "Teacher, I'm so tired. I'm not going today, or I'm not going next week." And the school, they were like, "No, we need to make them come." And I was like, "How do you do that when you are an adult with two children and like a workload so big that you're working overtime almost every day?"
Yeah.
And that's where feedback comes in, because when people start learning English, they are like, "Yes, I'm gonna do this. This is amazing." But after a while, they're like, "Why am I doing this? Why am I like?" Not because of the teacher. Sometimes the teacher may need to change a few things. Okay, it
Yeah.
happens. It's not only about the student. This is very
Yeah.
important. But it is natural to lose focus, especially if you're doing many things.
There are
In
going to be moments. I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, there are gonna be moments. There are gonna be moments, and I talked to many teachers over time, and they were like, "Oh, sometimes the students give up after a year and a half." And I think that the longevity that I have with my students is that I never let them forget why they started. Never,
Okay. Amazing. How do you do
never.
that? And what
Yeah.
do you, how do you do
So
that?
it all starts in the beginning when they come like, "Oh yeah, I'm interested in starting English classes," and I'm like, "Oh, why? Why do you want to do that?" Because
Yeah.
I'm always telling them, I know that it's important, you know that it is important, and everybody knows that. But what is the difference that English is going to make in your life? The actual difference. I'm not talking about, oh, it's going to be important for work. Also, is it going to be important for work? How so? How is
That
it going
makes
to help
sense.
you? Like, I really want them to be specific. Sometimes they
Absolutely.
are just like parrots. They are repeating things over without thinking why they are saying that. They're just saying because everybody's saying. So if everybody's saying, then it must be true. In this case, it is true. But why is it true for you? You know,
Okay.
for me, that's very important. So when a student when I ask, oh, how is it going to change in a year for you? And if this student is like, oh, it's not going to change much, I know that that student is not going to enroll in my class. I
Well, he's
know
probably not
it.
going to last long for sure.
Yeah, and if he or she, I actually work with women, but if she does enroll in my class, she's not gonna last long. She's not.
Okay.
Because I always tell them, you're paying me, but this is not my victory lap. My victory lap is when you're speaking or when you achieve that goal. And for that to happen, I'm really gonna work with you. I'm really gonna make it happen. Like 50-50. 50% from me, 50% from you. And I'm not gonna let
Excellent.
you forget that.
Fantastic.
And every 3 months I'm like, so we I enrolled you. And then I tell you, look, in the next 3 months we're gonna work that, that, and that. I give them actually a step by step, like a checklist.
Excellent.
That they, yeah. And then they are I'm going to tell them, look, this is how you go, this is how it went throughout these 3 months. You were good, you were really good at grammar and writing, really nice. And you're listening, yeah, you kind of have some difficulties here and there, and I'm going to show them if I have the time. Nowadays I don't have it as much because I have a volume of students that doesn't allow me to do that. But in the beginning I used to have like clips of them, of where their difficult lied, and then I'm like, oh, you see here, this was your problem in the beginning, this was here, this was like where we started working on it, and this is you now, you see. Or
Amazing.
if they didn't achieve, like, you know, like, this is you now, but this was you in the beginning, and look,
Hmm.
you're not 100%, but you're
Hmm.
50% now,
Hmm.
you know.
Yeah, you can definitely
And
show progress.
yeah, and when they see progress, they're like, yeah, the game is on.
No, for sure.
And yeah,
Yeah.
so you see,
Sorry. Keep going.
so this is the importance of feedback. It's not only for them, but it's not only for you to see as a teacher where you can improve your class, because every class I think is personalized. Every class it is, even if you're using the same material. Material is not the reason why you're personalizing the class, is how you teach the material.
Okay.
But it's for
Makes
the
sense.
student. Yeah, it is for the student. They're like, oh wow, yeah, this is happening. I am feeling this. Because during the class they're not feeling it. Sometimes they do.
Hmm.
If they like, I have a student, Giovanna, she's amazing,
Uh-huh.
but she had lots of difficulty with speaking. Lots of difficulties.
Okay.
She couldn't
What
pronounce the
kind of
name,
difficulties?
the kind of difficulty where it was difficult for her to say teacher
Okay, but like
or
what were her
one.
difficulties? Like
And
where were her difficulties? Like her
for
main
example,
difficulties? Was it in
the R,
control?
the R, pronunciation of the letter R
Okay.
in words,
Hmm.
it was very difficult for her to say. For example, let me think of a word that it was very difficult for
Let me
her.
just, while you think, 1 second, I'm
Okay,
going to let my
sure.
cat out real fast.
Okay.
All right. It was very difficult for her. Pronounce the letter R.
um, I think that in this case, it's not only accent, but it's like, I remember that we were learning about countries, and for her it was very difficult to say Russian or
Russian.
Russia. Yeah,
Okay.
or Russia.
Hmm.
For her, it was very, very difficult. I thought, it's okay if you want to say Russia. We're gonna work here on that. We're gonna work on that. And then, luckily, 5 months for her, Russia came naturally afterwards.
Okay.
But for her, it was very difficult, and sometimes she was very resistant. That is the word, resistant. She was very resistant in changing the adjectives.
How
For her,
so?
she didn't agree, and she didn't see the logic in saying the adjective first and the subject after.
So she resisted the logic. Yeah, that's
Like
really interesting. That's
blue
super interesting.
t-shirt.
A blue
Yeah,
t-shirt. So she would say
for
t-shirt
example,
blue
t-shirt blue. Yeah, you see
because
that
she
for her,
rejected. She knew the right way, but she
she
would
knew
reject the right
right,
way.
but she would forget.
Oh, she'd forget
She
because
would
she would
forget
reject
that.
it. She wouldn't
Yeah,
accept it.
exactly.
She wouldn't
And you
fix it.
see,
Yeah, it makes sense.
and you see that happens because of her prior knowledge. She had no contact with English, no contact at all. And
Yeah.
then after it was a struggle to tell her, look, you're going to look at the PDF I'm gonna send to you, and you're
Uh-huh.
going to listen to this, you're gonna read this, because you need to be in contact. It's like a relationship. English is like a relationship. So
Absolutely.
the more you know the person, the better you know the quirks and the little signs. Oh, she's mad. Oh no, he's just tired. You will know after a while. With English, it's the same.
How so?
Because sometimes we can teach some rules, but some rules are just like very intrinsic. They are very, they are from the language itself. It's like a cultural thing.
Can
For
you give an example?
example, of course, like slangs. She likes slangs. Giovanna likes
Right.
slangs.
Mm-hmm.
This is not
I
actually a
said,
beginner thing, but for her it was very important. I remember when I taught her out of the blue, she was like, "Why does blue is here if you're not talking about azul?" And I was like, "This is just a language thing. Like when we say minha nossa. Like, does it make sense to say something is minha and also nossa at the same time? Are we
yeah.
talking about a thing? No, we're not. It's an expression of it may be good, it may be bad. Out of the blue is the same thing. It means suddenly, but it's just another way to say that, of saying that, you know? And that is something that to get used to it is not something that you can teach, I think.
Yeah. I agree. I agree 100%. I think acceptance is a principle I think that all students should definitely learn is a really good part when it comes to some things of the learning process, like
Mm,
accepting your level. Like when you see that you are a specific level, don't expect more than that, but try to always expand on that, right? Expand that.
exactly.
So like if you can't make a
Exactly.
full sentence, instead of getting super anxious because you want to say much more, just
Mm,
try to say a little bit more, or try to say
yeah.
that sentence or that type of structure until it becomes easy for you. And then once it
Yeah.
becomes easy, it's going to be a natural process to want to add more information, right?
Hmm.
So once, if I'm talking about myself, um, if it becomes easy for me to say, "Hi, my name is Miguel, I'm 25 years old, and I do this, that, and the other," after a while, I want to add something new. And there you bring that other principle, which is not only okay, I accept my language, I accept my level, and I
Hmm.
accept where I am right now, so I can see what I can do and expand that
Yeah.
instead of expecting to do more than I can do and
Yeah.
get disappointed because I can't.
Hmm.
I accept that. And then I need to be proactive and active in the learning process. I can't be
Yeah.
like, okay, now I can do this. Okay, what else, teacher? It's like, no, okay, so now tell me more. So like, tell me more about yourself.
Yeah.
I'm Miguel, I'm Peruvian. Hmm, I like busy cities. I like to talk about dreams, sometimes people, sometimes places.
Yeah.
I like to talk about things that I'm doing that I have a difficult time with friends of mine. Like talk a little bit more about
Adding.
yourself. After a
Yeah.
while, you'll see that build up. You
Yeah.
go little by little, you go adding a little bit more.
Yeah.
Naturally, that's going to happen naturally
Yeah.
as speaking becomes easier. So I think acceptance has a really big part in like absorbing the language. Because
It
if you're
is. It does.
resisting, it just makes it so much more difficult for you to use it because you
Yeah.
won't say it, and it
You,
becomes really difficult for you to
yeah.
learn something that you don't do. You know, so it's a
And
really tough place for students to be. Sorry.
it is very tough for them. I don't have these problems anymore because all of my students are like, I don't know anything, but when I used to get students from all levels, I have a very specific case where the woman, she lives in the United States for I think 7 years,
Uh-huh.
and I asked her to form a sentence. Would you ask me if I'm happy? In Portuguese, of course. And then I would ask her to ask in English, and she was like, do. She put everything in the sentence except the things that needed to be put in there in the
Okay.
sentence. And I told her, look, you're not in the level that you're thinking you are because of this and that. If you see here the structure, you need to be able to fully use the structure and that structure. And she didn't accept that. For her, it was very difficult. It was kind of I don't want to say ego because she wasn't egotistical at all, but it definitely hurt her to know to learn that she wasn't in the level that she thought she was.
Yeah, naturally can
And
happen for sure.
it can happen a lot, and that hurt her journey in actually improving in learning. I told her the earlier you accept that, and you already have. I told her you already have some knowledge inside your head. So the more we can work on the foundation that's actually missing in you, if we can work on that, your progress is going to be quicker. You're going to maybe pick up speed faster than you think you are going to. Maybe I'm not promising you, but maybe that is going to happen.
Maybe,
But some students they cannot understand. They don't want to understand that. You see? Yeah. And feedback. I always like to bring difficult things to the classes,
difficult
and
how?
for example, text and audios and videos, and that's some students think, oh, I'm not ready for this, and you are. Do you want to know how? And then I show them, and then I help them to. And usually, I don't need to help them by telling them what it means. I only have, oh, what does that mean again? I don't remember. I hit my head. I'm like, bate a cabeça. What does that mean? And then they say, oh, it means that and that. And then, oh, so if we put that in the context of the sentence and the subject, what does it mean? And then they're like, oh, it means that and that. And I was like, see, you know, you see that you can do it. You see that you can understand something that you think it's difficult. I just
Absolutely.
presented in a way that you thought it was difficult. And if they
Absolutely.
think it's difficult, they're not even gonna try.
Makes sense. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
we're teaching. Sorry, did I interrupt you?
No, no, no.
No. I think when it comes to definitely dealing with students, we're dealing with different people, right?
Yeah,
And you'll have some of them that, will be more resilient than others, for sure.
yeah,
And I think that's going back to the motivation, right? Like
yeah,
reminding them why they started comes into play as something so powerful.
yeah,
And giving that and the feedback, I think, is something really interesting and very useful to have them remember, right? And I have a question, like how often do you give students feedback?
every 3 months.
Every 3 months. Okay.
Yeah. I know I've tried every week, but I thought that every week was too much. So every 3 months is ideal for me. So we I give the students time to absorb what they are learning, to try, make mistakes, and try again. And every 3 months, I sit down with them, like usually the last class of the third month, like at the end of the third month. I'm like, so this is the time we're going to talk about how was your development, you know?
Mhm.
And then I would tell them, look, some students are like, I know that you had to miss some classes, but that affected you in those kinds of ways. You know, each student is different. I have the same structure for the feedback, but what I say to them is different because every student is different. You see? And I have a question for you. When you're dealing with advanced students, do you give them feedback? Do you think it's important? And I think that is going to be different from like my students who are in the beginning of their journey.
I think it's super important. For advanced students, the feedback is a little bit different from beginner students and intermediate students in my
Hmm.
experience, simply because they're facing different difficulties, right? They're
Yeah.
not facing the same difficulties as the other levels. You know, I think one of the biggest barriers for really advanced students that I've seen happen super commonly is that they don't have another person at the same level or above to actually challenge their English, or someone that they can actually learn from if they're not having constant contact with the culture, with the content, or even traveling abroad and talking to people in real life.
Yeah.
So when they don't have those things, it becomes a bit of a challenge for sure.
Hmm.
And that, depending on who they are, it'll affect the way they speak. So my job with advanced students is to help them maintain the contact with
Yeah.
language, exposing themselves to things to modeling things, right? So, like well written books, good examples of people speaking, have
Yeah.
their exposure. I mean, maintain their exposure, you know?
That is the secret,
And
maintaining exposure.
yeah,
Do you feel like most of your students, they are not exposed to English as much as they should?
some of them advanced, some of them, most of them, they have it kind of in their routine because it's part of their profession, or in their routine because it's part of the things that they enjoy doing. So these two things are probably two of the
Yeah.
most common reasons
Yeah.
why they keep exposure. So if they don't have these two things and they're advanced, they don't normally practice it very much. They don't have a
Exactly.
writer that they really love, something that they really enjoy reading in
Yeah.
English, that they don't have in Portuguese,
And
or something that they have to do, like their job,
yeah, I mean,
they end up
I
struggling.
I I don't know if it's my type of students, but some of them don't even like to listen to music in English.
Yeah, that's always going to be a barrier. Like, if you don't like playing soccer and you only go play soccer because your mom forces you to go, and you
Yeah.
don't try afterwards, you don't do any drills, you don't practice outside of it, you don't have a favorite player, you don't watch soccer, do anything afterwards, you're going to learn very slowly, because
Yeah.
you're only going to go to the soccer games that your mom forces you to go to,
Exactly.
and you're not going to
Exactly.
expose yourself to anything else. You're not going to consume anything else. You're not going to be thinking about it at all. You're not going to be. It's not going to be active in your mind. It's not going to be
Yeah.
relevant.
And this is honestly, this is the work that I do with my students. You have to be exposed to English at least twice a week, other than the class, of course.
Oh yeah, it's a
And
good
it's
idea.
an
Sorry,
uphill. It's
I'm
an
sorry.
uphill. It's an uphill.
Mm-hmm.
It's very difficult. I'm not gonna lie. As a teacher, sometimes it gets really. It's very frustrating. It's very
Mm-hmm.
frustrating because like they are even movies. But even I love movies, and even at the movie theaters, we are if we like to watch movies with subtitles, the sessions where they happen are so scarce. Like I remember that I wanted to go watch Nosferatu, and I was very excited for that. But if I wanted to watch it in English, I would have to go at 10:30 p.m. All the other sessions were in Portuguese, and and it's crazy to me because
Where do you live?
English. I live in Salvador, Bahia, in the
Oh,
capital, in the capital.
interesting.
Can you believe that? I mean, if you live in São Paulo, I think you're gonna have options. But things are getting really bad because if the theater is doing that, they're not getting money from the subtitled sessions. They are not. The crowd that goes to the dubbed version is larger and bringing more money than the crowd that goes and watch with subtitles and in English in the original audio. You see, this is what's going on, and it's very scary
Why?
because English is an universal language. It's easily access. You have easy access to English. Is not like Japanese we have anime, but even so, Animes like, oh, look at this powering I have in here, like very niche vocabulary, like magic vocabulary, Titans vocabulary. Yeah, you're not gonna actually learn real life Japanese if you watch anime, unless you're gonna like arigato gozaimasu. That's what you learn. Or Russian, for example. We don't have Russian culture here. Now,
Yeah.
English is another story because we have so many big artists and everybody's like, please come to Brazil. But even so, people are not in contact. They are not exposed to English. And that is very scary, in my honest opinion.
I think that's super funny because I mean, learning is not an easy process, and it's hard to start
Hmm.
where it's hard to know where to start, right? Especially for a
Yeah.
person who doesn't know or hasn't learned a second language ever, you know.
Yeah. Hmm.
Um, so in a place like Brazil, obviously there's going to be a lot more people who speak the language, you know, the language of the country.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of natural for places um, around Brazil to have a much larger population who speaks Portuguese, right?
Logic. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there is the reality that today everybody's hyper connected. You
Yes.
can, you know, see what people in Sweden are doing, never
Yeah.
having gone there, just because we have the internet. So you have the option to be exposed to a lot of different types of things on the internet. And
Mhm.
it does make you think about, okay, how do I need to change the things that I consume in order to connect to those outlets, you know, to the places that are actually putting out information
Yeah.
in English, be it an influencer, or be it a journalist, or be it a writer, or be it someone that speaks English, posts in English, puts out content in English that you can consume. If you're not interested in anyone who does things in English and you're learning English, that's obviously going to make English going to be outside of the things that you see every day. It's going to be outside of the things that you do every day. And it's probably going to be restricted to the classroom. So at the same
Mm.
time, you know, it seems to be a lack of awareness, in my opinion.
Yeah.
You know, students don't, I guess they don't notice that
They
that makes a big
don't.
difference. But I think that's where teachers are important. Like, okay, look, you got to consume. You got to think about a quantity of time. How much
Yeah.
time, right, are you willing to invest in exposing yourself? How do you expose yourself? And how much exposure do you need? So let's say
Yeah.
you need, and students normally should need about 8,000 hours to become really good at English, really good. So listening
Yeah.
actively, interactively,
Mhm.
interacting actively for 8,000 hours actually gives them a very good level. So if they can do that, right, if they can break that down into smaller goals in their reality, they'll
Yeah.
have a realistic perspective of how long it's going to take them to actually get there, you know.
This is actually part of the feedback that I give. Sorry. It's
Oh,
actually part
fantastic.
of the feedback. The feedback. I actually, after I give them the feedback, I sit down with the student and I'm like, so, according to your schedule, with your routine, what can you do? And it must be something that you like. So the thing that most of my students like is friends. So I always ask them at least one episode every week.
Right.
That's one thing. At least that. This is I don't give them sometimes depending on the level, I give them short podcasts or videos like recipe videos. I have students who like recipes, so I give them that. But at least once a week. At least, at the very least, once a week.
Yeah.
Even for 5 minutes, you know, so they can have the contact with the exposure to the language, and they notice the difference when they do that and when they don't, in the months that in the trimester where they don't uh, have the time to just sit down and watch intentionally an episode or read a paragraph of a Wikipedia article. They notice the difference when they don't do that. You know,
No, for sure. Yes,
yeah.
they
They
can
usually
definitely
give
see the
your
difference.
students, they usually give them resources, or but they are already advanced, so they can research for themselves, right?
Well, like we have to keep tabs on how much exposure they're having.
Yeah,
What's the quality of their writing?
yeah. I give
Few of
them.
them do that, right? But
Hmm.
focusing on how they're developing themselves, how they're feeling more or less familiar with the language, um,
Yeah,
is definitely something to keep tabs on and let them
yeah,
know of as you give them feedback. So that's, I think, the main thing that I focus on when I see that their performance is dipping a little bit. I always
mm,
tell them like, okay, what's going on? You noticed, did you do this? Yeah, I noticed that. You noticed this mistake? Yes, I did. Amazing. Why
mm.
didn't you correct it? Oh, I'm fucking tired. Okay, I understand. Okay, but it's important that you at least try. Keep them up to the standard of what keeps them speaking
Yes,
well. You know?
yes,
Because the reality is that I think a lot of them are, in fact, tired. A lot of them do go through a lot of stuff. But as teachers, we need to remind them of what's important for them to grow or to maintain a level, you
yeah.
know?
There's a meme. I don't know how well you know memes, but there's one like of a woman say, "Imagine how tired we are," and I always tell them that, like, imagine everyone is tired, but we need to do this. We need to do this to get to where we want to be, language
Absolutely.
wise.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. All right.
Yeah.
Tell me, do you have students from different levels?
Well, most of my students are beginners,
Okay.
and my most advanced students are intermediate.
Okay, fantastic.
Most,
How do
yeah.
your feedback differ? How does your feedback differ from beginners to intermediates?
Well, from I have to admit that from for beginners, I am much more. I don't want to say understanding. But for intermediate, I always the intermediate classes are harder than the beginner classes. So what I expect from them is is how can I say that without sounding mean? What I expect from them is a level above, obviously.
A
So
level above of intermediate, if they're intermediate?
no, 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 not above intermediate, but above from beginner, obviously. So what I do
Oh, for sure.
is, yeah. So what I do is not in the structure, but since I am more, I'm paying more attention to the details. Sometimes in my lower intermediate, I see some mistakes that are like, this shouldn't be happening anymore. Why did you write she expect instead of she expects? So what is this? So what is this happening? You see, oh, I forgot. Oh, you shouldn't be forgetting that. You see?
Well, how long have they been doing that? I think that's very relative, right? I don't know if
Yeah.
I would do that for sure.
So yeah. So you see, and it never happened, but I they are aware that if it's still happening, I will tell them, look, maybe we should take some steps back.
Like go back in levels.
Yeah, if
Mhm.
you're still struggling with that, take some steps back. You know,
Okay.
maybe go slower and review some things. And they're always terrified of that. But I
Oh
always
yeah.
tell them, this is not a punishment. This is not a punishment. I tell them, like, yeah, with an open heart, this is not a punishment. I'm just
Okay.
being honest.
No, for sure.
I'm just being honest. I always tell them, look, you're paying for this, and I really want you to get the most out of it.
Right.
If you're having, if you're struggling with this, whatever it is, and we had extra classes to work on it, you're still struggling, maybe we need to slow down a little bit and take some steps back and see where the the hole in the foundation is.
Okay.
You see,
I know what
am
you
I
mean.
mean? Am I mean?
Are you mean? You're
Yeah,
asking
am
me
I
that?
mean? Yeah, am I mean like
I don't think you're
uh,
mean, but I do
yeah,
think that every mistake shows something that needs to be worked on.
it needs to be
And
worked
there are
on?
different types of mistakes, right? So
Mm,
you'll have mistakes that are lapses, and you'll
mm-hmm,
have fossilized mistakes as well. So
mm-hmm,
you'll have mistakes that happen once in a while to
yeah,
all levels because
yeah,
they're tired or because they're talking really quickly or because they're not paying
mm-hmm,
attention or
mm-hmm.
because they got distracted, whatever. There are many reasons why lapses happen. So as a teacher, I would probably see if it's something that they normally do or something that just
No, it's
happened right
reoccurring.
away.
If it's reoccurring, I always tell them, look, we need to stop that.
Well, yeah, if it's reoccurring, it already started happening it's been happening for a while. So
Yeah,
like if he's a new
yeah,
student and you see that he's always going through these same problems and he doesn't notice, it's a good
mm,
idea to maybe look at what have him see if it's a
yeah,
structural problem, show him the
mm-hmm,
structure, have him see the structure, and then identify what he's doing differently.
yeah,
If he can identify what he's doing differently from what the structure should be, then he knows what the right way is and he got used to speaking it wrong. So he needs to consciously start to change the thing. If
yeah,
he can't see, if he doesn't really understand, if this seeing the structure awakens a question in his mind where he says, like, oh yeah, I always had a question about this. I never understand where this goes
yeah,
and that's why he's been making these problems, then it's not something that happened because he he has repeated it wrong so many times, but it's just because he has neglected the doubt that he's always had. And it's time
very
to
interesting.
fix that, right? It's time
Yeah,
to let him know, make it clear. And from the moment that it's very clear, a good example of using it in real life immediately is a good way for him to start to fixate how it's supposed to be done. So
yeah,
let's say he has a problem with present perfect. And he doesn't really understand where to use it, when to use it. He doesn't see a lot of difference between it and the past, which is super common.
mm-hmm,
And he always makes it incorrectly. Like he always will put a simple past form instead of the past
as per,
perfect, right? The
yeah,
past participle and the verb.
this is so difficult
Maybe
to
we'll
work
maybe we'll
with.
talk about a simpler, much more common mistake. He will make a difference between he will confuse for and I don't
True.
know two, right? Right?
Yeah,
Or for and since when he's talking in the present
mm,
perfect.
yeah,
So he says, "Oh, I have lived in Brazil since 1990, or I have lived in Brazil for 24 years,
yeah,
right? Um, or 25 years in this case. Uh, he doesn't know the difference. So he's sometimes going to make lapse changes that make mistakes that
mm,
naturally make the sentence look incorrect and be incorrect. For example, when he says stuff like, um, I need to go, uh, I need to go to the bank for, no, I need to go for the bank. Sorry. I need to go for the
yeah,
bank
yeah,
instead of I need to go to the bank.
to the bank.
Or
Yeah,
I have been for the bank. Or I don't know, I have been living here 16 years.
oh yeah,
You're like, okay. There's a reoccurring problem with your fours and twos. And it's not only in the present perfect. It's not only in simple past and when you're talking about
The
to a place
general.
or for someone, right? It's a lack of understanding about those differences. And that's super normal depending on the phase of the student,
Yeah.
right? So if he understands, if you can understand that he doesn't understand the difference, it's important for him to see real examples
Yeah.
in context so that he can start to do the same, make the same type of sentences in
Yeah.
similar contexts in his own life.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go to the street market tomorrow at 1 p.m.
Yeah.
I'm going to go to this place. Go to. I want you to tell me where you're going to go tomorrow. I'm going to go. I'm going to go for the bank. You're going to go for the bank. Pay attention to your sentence,
Oh.
right? We just talked about that. And understand from the mistakes that he makes, if it's attention, if it's a lack of understanding how to use it, or if it's sometimes a lack of seeing it in context
Being
that makes sense to
used.
it, seeing it
Yeah.
being used.
Yeah, you're
So
making sense.
the same mistake can happen for very different reasons in different people,
Yeah.
you know. So it's important, I think, for the teacher to kind of identify why he's making that mistake and tell him to do more of the thing that is going to solve their problem. So if
Yeah.
the
Not
guy
only.
knows the two things, but he doesn't know when or where and doesn't see it
Yeah.
fitting in his life, like, okay, so I'm going to show you.
Yeah.
Look at all of this
Not
and
only.
give him ways to do it, like tools to do it.
Yeah. Not only to see what the mistake is, but who the student is, because the same mistake is not the same when we're talking about different students. That is very important.
Yeah, for
That is
sure,
very, very
always.
important.
You
Yes.
know, that's really cool. All right, listen. For today, I think we're running out of time, so we
Yeah.
have to stop. If you'd like to do this again, I'd really like to do it again. Let me know
Yeah.
some
Sure.
schedule and we'll talk about it. Cool.
Yeah. I'm always available on Thursdays. Thursdays are my day off. My days
Amazing.
off. So we can get together on Thursday and talk more.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, guys, what do you guys think about feedback? How have you guys received feedback? Have you guys ever felt, or have you guys ever received a tough feedback that you couldn't deal with or didn't understand? Let us know in the comments, guys. Thank you guys so much for coming and being here until now, if you are here until now. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you so much,
Bye,
Nicole, for
guys.
coming. Okay?
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.